Hello, this is the Death Row and Executions channel. I'm Paco Rivera. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more Death Row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. Also, check out my other channel here on YouTube called The Maximum Sentence, where I cover recent crimes and convictions and the maximum penalty handed down. There will be a link for that as well. I've got a really evil serial killer story for you today. David Leonard Wood, who also went by the nickname Skeeter, was born in Texas in 1957. He's now 67 years old. Wood grew up in a dysfunctional family, spent time in foster homes, and dropped out of school in the 9th grade. I don't think it's necessary to go into the details of that traumatic childhood because I'm not making any excuses for this guy. Millions of people have difficult upbringings and don't turn into serial killers. By the time Wood was 19 years old, in 1977, he was arrested and convicted for indecency with a child and received a 5-year sentence. He was released on parole after serving only 2 of the 5 years in 1979. Several months later, in 1980, he was arrested and convicted for the brutal, indecent assault of 2 women that took place 1 week apart. Remember, as I've said before, YouTube doesn't like it when I use the R or SA words in my videos. Wood was sentenced to 20 years for those crimes. He was released after serving only 7 of the 20 years on January 14, 1987, and settled in with a roommate in El Paso, Texas. A month later, beginning in February of 1987 until August of that year, 9 young women and girls went missing during those 6 months. Marjorie Knox, who was 14 years old, was reported missing from the El Paso area by family on February 13, 1987. She had gone to attend a Valentine's Day party with friends at Veterans Park in El Paso. 3 weeks later, on March 7th, 14-year-old Melissa Alanis went missing from El Paso. She went out to play video games at a convenience store and never returned home. Family at first thought she ran away because of arguments with her parents at home, so it took a little while before they filed the missing persons report. The family of Karen Baker, age 20, reported that her daughter was last seen attending a gathering at the Hawaiian Royale Motel on June 5th. 2 days later, on June 7th, the mom of 15-year-old Desiree Wheatley reported that her daughter never came home after attending a last day of school party with friends in El Paso. On June 28th, 19-year-old Sherilyn Vasquez went missing in El Paso after going to buy cigarettes at a Circle K convenience store. On June 3rd, a 17-year-old girl named Angelica Jeanette Frausto was also reported missing. Now, Angelica was a frequent runaway and was actually already gone from her home for several months, but she would always return. And when too much time had passed since she was last seen, a missing persons report was filed with El Paso police. On August 12th, 1987, 24-year-old Rosa Maria Casio went missing. Now, Rosa Casio actually lived in Ciudad Juarez in Mexico, but she would sometimes drive 30 minutes from there to visit her sister and friends in El Paso, Texas. After a night that they were all gathered at a bar in El Paso, she disappeared. It is reported that Casio had also sometimes worked as an exotic dancer in El Paso. In August of 1987, 14-year-old Dawn Marie Smith got into an argument with her parents and ran away from home. She had remained in contact with her family until August 28th, but then all contact suddenly stopped. When way too much time had passed without hearing from Dawn, the family filed a missing persons report. A 23-year-old woman named Ivy Susanna Williams was never reported missing by anyone. Nobody even knew she was missing. She must not have had a wide social circle. However, her body was found in the desert along with 5 of the other females that I have told you about. She was the 6th and final body found, this time by a couple that were collecting aluminum cans in the desert. It took a while to identify the remains of Ivy Susanna Williams until it was learned that she was a dancer in one of the clubs in El Paso and had family in Colorado. 9 women and young girls that vanished. In September of that same year of 1987 that all these girls disappeared, a water utilities worker surveying water lines in an area of the desert saw parts of a body sticking out from the ground. He immediately called police, and that's when the first body was found. The remains of Karen Baker, the 20-year-old who was at a party late one night at the Hawaiian Royale Motel. While crime scene technicians were gathering evidence near the location of Karen Baker's decomposed body, they spotted some soil that appeared to be disturbed and began digging. That's when they found Rosa Maria Casio, the woman who was visiting from Mexico. Knowing that there were at least 9 women and girls missing, authorities spent the next 6 weeks searching many square miles of the desert. And 2 more bodies were found, but that happens a bit later. In the meantime, soon after the discovery of the first 2 bodies, Karen Baker and Rosa Maria Casio, it was all over the news. And while sitting home watching the news, a woman named Judith Kelling Brown contacted police with a story to tell. During the interview, Judith told police that she is certain that she knows who the killer is because he was about to kill her. Judith said that several months before, a man driving a beige-colored pickup truck offered her a ride and drugs, and she accepted. She said that during the ride, the man introduced himself as Skeeter, which she assumed was a nickname. She hadn't known at the time that the man didn't care about disclosing something of his identity because she was going to be dead anyway and wouldn't be able to tell anyone. Judith said that the man then drove into an area in the desert, removed her from the car, and restrained her wrists with rope. She said he then got an orange blanket out of the bed of the truck, made her lay on the blanket, and then he brutally forced himself on her. Judith said that after the indecent assault was over, he used the rope on her wrist to tie her to the bumper on the back of the pickup truck. He then got a shovel from the bed of the truck and began digging a hole in the ground right there in front of her. So she was watching him dig her grave. But then something amazing happened. While the man was digging, she heard voices talking from somewhere in the distance. And that Skeeter must have heard it too because he stopped digging and was turning his head as if trying to figure out where the voices were coming from. They then saw what appeared to be some headlights from a car out in the distance. That's when the man panicked. He gathered the orange blanket and shovel and tossed it into the back of his truck. He then untied Judith's hands from the back of the pickup truck and told her, "If you report this to police, I will find you and I will kill you." He then drove off quickly, leaving her completely nude, sitting on the ground. A short time later, Judith got to her feet, ran over to a road, and flagged down a truck driver that stopped to pick her up. He gave her some cardboard boxes to cover herself up with. Judith remained terrified that if she reported what happened, that the man will find her and kill her, so she never reported it. Until the day that she saw the news about the 2 girls' bodies that were found in the desert. Now, here's something even more amazing. A detective asked Judith to take him to the location where she was assaulted. She directed the detective along various roads that eventually took them into a desert area. She then said, "Stop the car." She later pointed at the ground and said, "This is where it happened." That spot was right where the bodies of Karen Baker and Rosa Maria Casio were found, buried in the ground. The following month, in October, authorities discovered the remains of 2 more bodies, Dawn Marie Smith and Desiree Wheatley, buried in the desert. And during the autopsy, several strands of orange fibers were found on Desiree Wheatley's body and hair. Remember, Judith told detectives that the man who attacked her first laid out an orange blanket on the soil, on the ground. Now, detectives got a break when they decided to interview students at a high school. It just so happened that two of the girls that had gone missing over the previous months might not have known each other, but both had attended that same high school. When detectives provided several students with a full description of the man that attacked Judith, several of them had all said, "Oh yeah, that's Skeeter. Creepy guy. Comes around driving a beige pickup truck, trying to talk to the girls." And an even bigger break came when one student actually knew Skeeter's full name, David Leonard Wood. When a photo lineup that included David Wood was shown to Judith Kelling Brown, she positively identified him as the man who attacked her in the desert. So police found David Wood and arrested him for that crime. Something interesting, when police arrived at the home of David Wood to arrest him, as they were putting handcuffs on him, he had made the statement, "You guys got the wrong guy. I didn't kill those girls." Police then told him they don't know what he's talking about. They were arresting him for assaulting a woman who is still alive. Oops. In reality, investigators were already convinced that David Wood is the reason 2 bodies were found and 7 other girls were missing. He assaulted a woman and was about to bury her just steps from where 2 bodies were later buried and found. That's no coincidence. While David Wood is sitting in jail on assault charges, a search of his home and pickup truck was conducted. No evidence was found in the home, and his car was thoroughly cleaned out. Wood's roommate told investigators that Wood had been meticulously cleaning and vacuuming his pickup truck lately. The roommate said that Wood kept a shovel in the back of his truck, but now that's gone. Wood must have been getting worried that police were closing in on him. In his mind, he made a big mistake. He let one woman remain alive. One investigator asked the roommate for the vacuum cleaner that Wood used to vacuum his truck, and the bag was removed. The contents of that vacuum cleaner bag were sent to a lab, and orange fibers were found mixed into the contents. In the forensics lab, those strands of orange fibers were compared to the orange fibers found on the body of Desiree Wheatley, and they were determined microscopically to be one and the same. Further analysis showed that all the chemical compounds of the fibers were identical, an exact match. The fibers on Desiree's body came from the blanket that was in Wood's pickup truck. In March of 1988, David Wood went on trial for the abduction and assault of Judith Kelling Brown, and he was sentenced to 50 years in prison for that crime. Eventually, 2 additional bodies were found, those of Angelica Frausto and later Ivy Susanna Williams, now putting the body count at 6. All of the bodies in the ground were nude or partially nude, and all of them had their removed clothing strewn beside them in the ground. Jewelry and other personal belongings were also found, and all the bodies were found face down, their bellies to the ground. An autopsy was performed on all of them, of course, and medical examiners determined that some were stabbed and others were strangled. Yet others, the medical examiner could not determine a cause of death because of how much the bodies had decomposed. David Wood, sitting in prison with a 50-year sentence, went on trial in September of the year 1992 for the abduction and murders of the 6 girls. And on January 14, 1993, he was sentenced to death. To this day, David Wood says that he is innocent. He says he didn't do it, that he did not abduct and kill anyone. One thing we do know, ever since David Wood has been locked up, the disappearances in El Paso stopped. During trial, a prison cellmate of David Wood came forward saying Wood has not only been bragging about his crimes, Wood told him that investigators got the number wrong. It's not 9 girls he killed, it's 15. The cellmate also stated how David Wood told him that almost every one of the girls, he had easily lured them into his pickup truck by offering drugs and a ride. I can only guess that if he wasn't able to lure the girl, he then had to physically assault and force several of them into his truck. Family and friends of Desiree Wheatley, for instance, a very responsible young girl, a good student, are absolutely certain that she did not drink alcohol or do drugs and would not have accepted a ride from a stranger. I don't want to get too much into the personal lives of the other victims, but I can tell you that from what I've researched, from what I've read, most of them, even the really young ones, were making a lot of poor choices in their lives. And I can see where they may have been enticed or influenced by Wood's advances, who is said to be a very smooth talker. It seems from the reports that Wood specifically targeted girls that were runaways, girls down on their luck, having problems at home, and probably girls not even being kept track of by family, which is why the number 15 might be correct, or maybe even more. One other thing the jailhouse snitch stated, he said that Wood told him that as he was burying one of the girls, that he thinks she was still alive. In fact, the medical examiner had also reported that one of the girls had some soil in the back of her mouth, which seemed to indicate that she had breathed in some soil while buried. There have been several true crime television episodes that have covered this case, and quite a few presentations right here on YouTube. What most of them don't have, because those shows were made before a date was scheduled, is the scheduled date that David Leonard Wood will be executed. Wood is set to be put to death in Texas on March 13th of this year. Please remember to hit the subscribe button so that you're alerted when the next video comes out. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more death row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. My name is Paco. Take care and bye for now.